Thanks everyone for downloading this episode of the Nerdball Podcast. I'm your host Lorenzo Melcher, coming to you from PB Studios, my parents' basement studios. And pretty soon I won't have to clarify what PB means, but for now I get new listeners, so here it is, Parents' Basement Studios. Thank you for always sharing, liking, subscribing, downloading to the podcast. Whatever you can do to help the podcast grow, it's greatly appreciated. Don't forget Random Mondays. I just put one out last Monday, so check that out. It's about a new podcast that my buddies are doing called One Heel of a Podcast. It's a wrestling podcast. Things I Learned Tuesdays. I should have put an episode out last Tuesday. I'm recording this early, so I don't know if I actually did it or not. So I'm guessing I did it. So check those out and subscribe so you never miss any of those Random Mondays or any extra podcasts that come out. Subscribe wherever you're listening to, especially the YouTube channel. Those numbers have been going up the past few weeks, so thank you for doing that. That is everything. So I appreciate you all, and I hope you enjoy the episode.
Hi, this is Dean Davis, and this is the Nerdball Podcast.
This is the Nerdball Podcast with Lorenzo Melcher.
All right, Dean, thanks for coming on my podcast, man.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Some
Great
people,
conversation.
Yeah, some people I ask, like, hey, can you come on a podcast? And they got questions, right? Rightfully so. Like, you just don't want to come on and be like, I don't know what this is or whatever. And you're like, yeah, man, let's do it. But we've with over the past couple of years, we've seen each other here and there and talked. So I'm looking forward to getting to know you a little bit more, and I'm excited for our conversation.
I appreciate that. I appreciate the opportunity. I think it's a great thing what you're doing, right?
Yeah.
And, getting the message out there of the projects that I'm involved in, but what the community's involved in too, from my perspective, is it's a good angle, right?
Yeah, this is great. I'm looking for all that. But the first thing I always ask people is, what is something you nerd out about? Something you're really into, something to get you away from your daily stuff.
I'm covered in paint, so I'm gonna leave it as that, right?
Okay.
I'm addicted to it.
Yeah.
As an artist, I kind of. I've leaned into that kind of culture pretty full force. I was on the railroad before that, right?
Okay.
Like I did that for 16 years. And a lot of people hear this story, but the story kind of stems from the culture in Toledo telling you, oh, you got to have a real job.
Yeah.
You got to have insurance, take care of your family. Art isn't a real thing. And now this is my full-time job. So I'm a complete nerd about it. I love it. I eat paint probably more than I do nutrition. I wish they'd come up with a paint that's got like a coat on the side of like the nutrition value on it.
Your murals are beautiful.
Thank you.
They're also like, they're so big. Like, to me, like, okay, it is very impressive if you take a piece of art and it's on the wall and you're doing it. That's also impressive. But yours are so big. I can't even fathom like the knowledge, the all the work that goes into it beforehand, like just because of the sheer scale of it.
You said something really strong right there. It's the pregame.
Mm-hmm.
The pregame on these things is exactly what makes them so like they come across so well, right? Because some people are like, man, you just crank them out. And I'm like, you have no idea. Like, there's so much pre-planning.
Yeah,
so,
well, because the one you're working on now, I'm watching it from across the river, and it seems to go up like that.
It's quick, isn't it? Right. And it does seem that way, right? It really does. But it's these marathons and that's what the thing I love about like big scale murals is. It's not something you're going to do in a day or two, right? You're just not you're not going to accomplish it then. You need to put a month into it, right? And back in 2016, I ran an Ironman. You got to prepare like 2 years for those things, right? So I'm really accustomed to those jobs like that, where it's like, oh my God, this is going to take a while. So kind of put your seatbelt on and just be prepared.
Yeah.
You're going to go through the gut of it, right? The suck of those murals is you're going to get tired. You have to trench through those like, oh, this is just work stage to get to that final look in where it's at. But I think it's like, friends like you that look at it and say, man, you're cranking it out. It looks great from this side. That fuels that drive. I think the community, the way the community embraces it, like the way that people look at it and they go, oh my God, this thing is just sick, man. You've had some color to these walls. And we're struggling through this winter still, right?
Yeah.
I mean, here we are at Memorial Day, and people are still bundled up.
Yep,
And hoodies, and I mean, it's perfect for big guys like me and you.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
but at the end of the day, my wife's just this little teacup, and she's like, "Can you please just get the sun out already?" And but when you see those gray areas, right? Like
Yeah.
Toledo's in, and we endure like 4 to 5 months of this horrible kind of gray skies.
Mm-hmm.
That's truly what I'm trying to do is get as much color on these walls so that we have something to counterbalance that,
Yeah.
and help the mental health game a little bit more.
Yeah.
So that's big with me.
Yeah. Obviously, since I've only known you a couple years, that's all I know you is Dean the artist. But
Yeah.
when did you start this? Like, when was this? And you're like, you know what, I like art. Was it just as a kindergartner, or was it just something you really got into as a high schooler? Like,
I discovered this talent like in second grade.
Okay.
In second grade, I remember the moment I was over at Birmingham Elementary over on the east side,
Mm-hmm.
and I wasn't paying attention like most kids in
Yeah.
second grade don't do, and I stumbled across this amazing thing of like I just understood how you could create imagery a little bit different, and so art was always like chasing me around in my life, so I knew it in second grade. And then I went through high school, and I was just really, really good at it, But
what kind of stuff were you doing?
a lot of that cartoon, a lot of that like anime style, like, but in the '90s, and so anime really wasn't on the scene
Yeah.
in that kind of field. We had Neon Flux, we had basic comic book kind of illustrations, and you would kind of branch into those as those kids, but. I went out to Clay and Clay High School. They had a really old school cat, that was in the driver's seat teaching, so he was just an amazing vault of knowledge, but it was old school knowledge. So you're learning like oil paintings. You're learning like, how to throw wheels and, pottery and stuff of that nature. So he really wasn't interested in, that newer style of art at that time. In the computer world hadn't been seen, we weren't digitally doing things, and so everything was still in tracings and, and 5 or 6 layers of tracing paper kind of build out. So when you have those kind of like building blocks, I always say like people that came up in the 90s in art just had that amazing kind of like blend of both old school and new school ways if you were willing to accept it. And so the new school way is obviously the computers, right?
Yeah,
Tablets.
yes, yeah.
And if you can adapt that way, I mean, you're just a force to be reckoned with. And that's one thing that I think I've kind of embraced is the fact that I'm an old school artist that knows how to use a brush, but you can hand a computer to me too, and I can work around that as well.
I think that's an important thing to discuss too, is that, or what you mentioned was having no type of computer, going through all the beginnings and now where it's at now. And you're right with the embracing part of it. Cause for me, it's the same thing. Like we got our first computer in like 1998 or something like that.
Right.
And we played little video games on it, did whatever. And then we kept progressing. And at some point for me, I like stopped progressing with computers. Now I have to get back into it, especially with this editing and using AI. Like now I'm really diving back into it.
That's right.
But it helps having that little bit of knowledge, because they're like, oh yeah, these things can, like the things I can do with my phone,
Exactly.
It's being part of like nothing to where it is now. It is a cool generation to like go through those.
It really is. I love that bridge, right? Because it took a lot of change. It took a lot of accepting change, right? And not that you were kind of governed by one way of thinking. So, I started with Photoshop. I think it was like 4.5 was the Photoshop that I was pirated. Someone hacked for me, and I wasn't going to pay $1,500 to Adobe at that time. I've probably handed them easily a couple keys of cars at this point, but I definitely hacked that first stage.
Yeah.
And
Well, that's how you learn. That's how you figure that out. Like if you're, let's say you're 17 or whatever it was when you hacked this thing, and because you didn't have the money,
That's
and
right.
now and maybe they do, maybe they don't care, but now you are giving them money because of that
That's
first
right.
time. Right?
Exactly. And I got really good at Adobe Photoshop, but then Corel Draw was out there, Illustrator was out there, and those were all different beasts that you kind of like. It's kind of like Apple and Android.
Yeah.
You choose the weapon
yeah.
you're going to use for your career.
Yeah.
Some people can be multi-skilled, right? And I know artists that use Adobe and Illustrator, but for my platform that I go with, right, for the artwork that I kind of stay in, I can use Adobe Photoshop and Procreate, and that's all I need in my wheelhouse. That's all I can get. I can get through everything I need to work with. We're there, but they're all tools.
Yeah.
I don't lean on any of them and say, this is the final product. So when somebody asks me, they're like, well, what's your media type? Right? I always defer back and say, well, it's multimedia.
Yeah.
It's got to be multimedia because I don't lean on one because you're always going to leave something off the table that another media could help that with.
Okay.
So like the paintings that I do, those are all multimedia. They're going to start out with a computer, play around with them on the computer. Then I'm going to actually paint them with acrylics. Then I'm going to airbrush on top of it. So I'm going to build it up as much as I can and use every technique that I've ever thrown at something to get that final look that I want it to look like.
Yeah.
And that's the same thing with murals.
Yeah.
Same thing. You gotta build it up, beforehand. I used like if I have to use a drone shot of it.
Yeah.
I'll use a drone shot. Most of the time you can just, with cameras on your phone, you can just kind of slide outside of the mural and get a nice wide range of it, and then you can get your markers from there. So, but then it goes right back to the computer, overlay your lines, print it out, go up to the lift, and you start building yourself together. And then but your talent's got to connect it all. Everyone's like, well, it sounds like it's just paint by numbers then. and I'm like, as much as I'm like, that's the dumbest shit I've ever heard. And that's been in these heated conversations I've had in the last year. They're like, well, it's just paint by numbers. And I'm like, I wish it was.
Yeah.
Honestly, it would make this world a lot better, but it's not.
Yeah.
So
that's so wild to me. That's so but people are always looking for, especially the people that are paying whoever to do whatever. They're always looking for, well, how can I get a couple bucks back?
Yeah.
How can I not pay?
Minimize the value.
It's paid by numbers.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Minimize the value. That's great. Yes.
Yes.
Yes. And it happens all the time for everything.
It does. It does, especially when they see how fast it goes up. This is a big argument that I have, and so you see the mural going across at the Holcomb Silos, right across the river.
Yep.
And I don't know across the Maumee River. What would we say that is? It's got to be a couple hundred yards.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Sure. from the shore to shore.
Park.
Yeah.
Yep.
So at a couple hundred yards, you see that thing. And it's like going up. Yep. Like last week, we killed it. And I say we a lot because I always I say we because my wife has to put up with me not being there. Because
that's good.
So
I like that. I like
say
that.
we. But so we get this thing up there, and it's flying, right? Yeah. It's day by day, and then we're dodging raindrops.
Yep.
So Friday kind of cut loose and said, okay, enjoy it. And so I was up there all day. But the fact was, it's like people still think, well, I don't want to pay you what we agreed to because you got it done in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And it's like, it doesn't matter if it took 7 years. Like if we agree to a price, it's the price that we agreed to.
Plus, it's not the painting hours; it's all the hours before you actually start painting, right? Like, there's all these other things that go into it, and people just see the final product, like, oh yeah, they just freehanded and went up there and went after it,
right. They see the time on the wall, and then they're all of a sudden it becomes like that's the only thing they care about, right? I don't understand why art is always negotiated like that. It always confuses me, like how. The craft of things, people that are craftsmen, that dedicate themselves to the trades, whatever they choose to do, right? And I think that there's a lot of different people that consider themselves craftsmen, but they get really good at what they did, right? They spend 30 years, 30, 40, 50 years mastering things, right? Making themselves so efficient. And the first thing that happens is people then try to prey on that and say, well, it doesn't, why should we pay you so much because, you weren't here that long. And there's so many stories and like kind of like wisdom tales that say about that kind of comment. But,
I've seen that very similar comment where it's like, yeah, I wasn't here that long, but you're paying for the last 30 years of what I was learning. That's what you're paying for.
Absolutely right.
And my brother-in-law's a musician, Jake Paluski, and he does the same stuff. Like, well, I paid so-and-so this much. You go, okay, well then get him back.
That's right.
Because this is what I'm charging.
Exactly.
And,
exactly.
And like you said, any kind of artist, any kind of craftsman, it is like you're so good at it. It takes so little time. Like, well, why am I paying this extraordinary?
And it's always in the hindsight that they're throwing that at you, right?
Yeah.
They're not trying to say that when they see this beautiful design that you present them to, right? Or they go to a concert and they hear this beautiful song that he sings, right? And they're like, we want him to play for us.
Yeah.
And then he goes out there and he just cranks it out and it's beautiful. Like with art, I think art in Toledo, that's a great conversation to like lead into about the value of art in Toledo. And I think a lot of artists, they make the mistake and they go online and they try to, because they don't feel comfortable or confident in establishing a value for themselves. So they go online and they start trying to compare, right? They Google search it, and it's a poison, because at the end of the day, there's nothing that's going to share with them that value.
Yeah.
Of what you want it to
Well,
be.
one of my favorite quotes is "Comparison is the thief of joy."
Oh, so beautiful.
Yeah.
It's so beautifully said.
Yeah,
right.
And that's what you're saying. Like, just be you, but it's hard. It's hard to do that.
And they think that
No one's gonna like me.
Yeah, or they think they're going to leave something on the table, right? Because someone's going to be like, okay, yeah, fine. And you're like, oh my God.
Wait a minute.
Shit, I should have said more,
Yeah.
But at the end of it, you just feel comfortable with the number. But Toledo's ecosystem, I always try to tell these artists, Toledo's ecosystem isn't Chicago or New York or, let's LA.
Yeah.
In art in those places, I sold a painting down in like Boca Raton, Florida for, a good amount of money.
Yeah.
And there's no way in Toledo I could have ever got that capital for it, right? Just because it's like, how is somebody going to spend months rent, or multiple months rent for a painting? That's just, it's unrealistic.
Yeah.
But then I know artists in Toledo, that are just suffering because they're not selling anything. They just got wallpaper. They're beautiful artists. I mean, they're tremendous artists, but their ego jumps in front of that and it tries to say, no, I'm only going to get this amount of money for this. And it's like, wait a minute, take a step back, share the art. That's what it was built for in the first place. So if you can get compensated some way, right? Compensate yourself, move forward and do another creation. It's better to crank him out with a positive attitude than to sit with one that's anchoring your attitude back. And now all of a sudden you're miserable. You're in a dirty diaper, and it's just terrible. So,
you're explaining the process and everything you do. Is there, in your whole process, is there one part of it you're like, man, this is my favorite part of it?
Getting obviously with public art and gallery art, it's like two different beasts. I think public art has changed the landscape of the art industry more than anything else in the last 60 years that I've seen. It's just been amazing. But public art is a conversation for communities, and that's the beautiful thing about public art. And so you've got to find this thread that's going to connect what you want to paint to what the community wants to say. And that's huge. Now, gallery art's not that conversation. Gallery art is, I'm going to paint whatever I want. And once I release it, once I give it to the viewer, I'm no longer the creator. And now it's just a matter of me being there with the viewer. But it's whatever I want to say. So I go back to public art and being that conversation that it is for the community. I think the most important thing there, and what I love the most, is hearing what the community has to say. Did I do a good job for them? And I think if I can use my talent to convey messages for the community, I'm just full of joy. Like, that's my blessing right there, right? That I get to give that message back. You're always going to have naysayers. That's the funniest part about it, right? I remember when we did the ADM silos. And we just started putting these, base blue up there. I hear this guy on the Blade saying, silos need to be gray. And you hear these comments, and obviously the first thing it's going to hit is your ego.
Yeah.
So your ego wants to strike back and be like, what the heck? What are you talking about, man? This is ignorance. But you just start to laugh, right? And you let it go, because it's just people. You're never going to make everybody happy. And if you're trying to go for everybody's happiness, just because I use the word community doesn't mean it's everybody's opinion.
Yeah.
It's the masses. It's a positive, right? And if it's negative, it doesn't mean the community is agreeing with it. And so I keep that in mind, a lot.
Yeah. What's like that the mural under the pedestrian bridge
Yeah.
because there's so many different symbols in there and so many different pictures, and it is a big mural on both sides of the street.
Right.
But if you sit there and look at it, you can see all these other little things in there, and that's what I like.
Yeah,
about it, too.
that's a
big
beautiful
community thing.
piece. I like the way you said that too, because sometimes you just have one symbolism in a mural, but like that piece is it's littered full of positivity.
Yeah,
It's good.
It's nice.
Yeah, that was good, but that was also a collaborative piece. You know,
Yeah.
Chris Rodriguez jumped on that one with us, and I think just teaming up with other artists, that's what magic's all about, in my opinion. When you can work with another artist, and you know that you're never going to have all the solutions. Two people are going to come together, a group of people,
Yeah.
possibly. And when you hit that mark where people are like, how did you do that? Then you know you kind of created magic. And I think that that's something that's really, really powerful in that, right? Like, but working with artists, that's another thing. Public art gives you the ability to do that a little bit more. Yeah.
You know, the mural. So that one, because I get to see it. If I wanted to, I could see it every day. I could just walk right in my office. You know, obviously the one on Toledo Pickle and the one on those the silos next to it. I can see those from the park. They're so impressive, and what makes for me, I was talking to my coworkers. The Toledo Pickle one, when you were texting me like, "Hey, can we get the restroom unlocked?" I had no idea what you needed. I thought you just like needed a wash. I didn't realize what you were doing. Right.
Right.
So when I saw your pictures, and it's so impressive, I was explaining it to him because I didn't have the pictures pulled up. When the doors are shut, those double doors, everything looks great.
Cohesive, yeah.
When the doors are open, everything looks cohesive. When you go inside, when the doors are closed, like I didn't realize it was going inside. It was really impressive.
I got to
It's
tell
really
you, so
impressive.
there's a certain sense of gamble in life, right? And that was that gamble that I didn't know how I was going to mention. You can't plan for something like that.
Yeah.
And what I was planning on doing was just closing those doors and seeing how I was going to tie it together.
Yeah.
And when I closed them, I'm like, holy crap, they're already lined up. How did this work out, right? You know, like I never would have put that together.
Oh,
like
really?
that.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. Like there's no mastermind on that one. That was a complete stumble, right? But it worked out great.
It looks awesome.
No,
And-
thank you so much.
And if you
Yeah.
can't, I'm definitely having a hard time describing it. But if you don't mind, I might put a link to your Facebook page in the
Please.
show notes.
Yeah,
so people can
that'd
see
be
all
awesome.
these pictures and stuff.
Yeah.
But like it because like. Like, oh yeah, the doors are closed. It matches. The doors are open. The matches, yes, but also the interiors on both sides match, right? So that's what's cool.
And when you open up doors, that means the inside of the door now becomes the outside of the outside.
Yeah.
And that's what then it's seamless on that side. But
Yeah.
then when you close it, it buttons itself up, and it's also seamless.
Yeah.
I mean, the stars lined up for me on that one. I'll tell you that. I've definitely had them before where I'm like, oh no, this is going to be bad.
Yeah.
You know. But the Toledo Pickle one, when the Metro Parks kind of threw that out there, right, as the RFQ, they did it in a really, really positive way. You know, I wasn't solely picked. They had a really fair RFQ process for that. And I was just completely honored when they chose me to do that project. But it just helped tie together the whole idea of what I'm trying to do with the whole riverfront.
Yeah.
You know, and to be then part now of, I'm then now part of 3 locations, you know, in hopefully 23 locations altogether down the river.
Okay.
Of artwork that's going to just change the whole landscape of the Maumee River. You know, I mean, and we've got such a beautiful river already. I mean, a lot of people don't realize, you guys do, just because you're tied to the Great Lakes Museum right there.
Yeah.
But like, I mean, we've got this largest freshwater pool in the entire world. You know, the Great Lakes are. And then you come into the Maumee River, and when you Google map it, trust me, it doesn't look friendly. I mean, it's this gray or this brown kind of stream of life, but it's very important. You know, and it's been this huge causeway since the beginning of Toledo. You know, back in the 1800s, it would have been.
Yeah.
You know, but you know, to try to bring that back to life right now. You know, in this era that we're just existing in.
Yeah.
And to then say, how can we mark our territory? You know, how can this generation that we're in mark our territory on this river so that it's known forever? And I think that that's really what the River Gallery Project's all about, is to put that symbol on it.
And there's so many, and these could be the other spots you're talking about, but even I'm thinking about, as you're saying that, like, well, I know where I would want want some art to be, just because I'm in the park all the time, or International Park, we call it Glass City Upriver now. Like there's all kinds of spaces in there that would be sweet. Along the seawall, like there's places all over the place, and I don't know, like I said, what the grand plan is, but and you're right, because it does, like, right away, like, your silo shouldn't be gray. Like it's a canvas. It's a great canvas.
It's a huge opportunity, for people to decorate like this huge element that used to be so industrialized.
Yeah.
So, and that's really what, like, the beginning thought is I was up probably like 120 feet up in the air, working on the ADM silos, and you can kind of see pretty far, right? Like, you can see both, you can see down in Maumee, and you can see all the way to the lower level bridge, which is getting close to the actual Lake Erie.
Yeah.
But it's just pins of industrial elements that probably at one time, that's what the landscape of Toledo was all about, right?
I mean, all the trains, everything that ran down there. Yeah.
Huge, right? And they used that waterway. So why not reuse that waterway?
Yeah.
And I know there's a huge amount of developers that are talking about it. Everyone that they do analysis with, everyone says the biggest untapped resource you have is this river.
Yeah.
And so Metro Parks, they're doubling down on it. I mean, you can see that. Toledo is as well. And then there's multiple other developers that I know that are also trying to build up right on the riverfront.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping that that's the same energy. But it goes back to public art, and we're trying to draw people to Toledo to tell the story. Well, if we're going to bring them here, let's bring them here and show them a good thing.
Yeah.
Let's not just show them like the eye candy from the interstate.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm excited about it. I'm excited about it.
We've mentioned these big murals that you've done, but I didn't ask, like, why'd you choose to do what you do on them?
Oh,
that question sounded really dumb coming out of my mouth.
No, it's a good. When murals get chosen, it goes through quite a couple of different processes, right? The one that we chose with the Holcomb silos, you've always got you've got a property owner to keep in mind. You don't want to step on their toes. They're not going to give you permission. And with all the projects, the first thing that we had to come across was permission, right? And so they have a seat at the table, right? Which rightfully so.
Yep.
So now there's two opinions in the room, and then you have to try to find financing for it. Yeah. So now you have a third seat at the table. And so you're trying to tie these things in. And so the biggest goal that I had was, or the easiest kind of common denominator that I always tell, like, anybody that I'm talking about the designs with is, we're talking about the resilienceness of Toledo here, right? What makes Toledo so great?
Yeah.
And we're talking about that in a way that we're like, are we talking about like all of the things that have created Toledo for its name? Is it the work ethic of Toledo? Like, what is the positives, right?
Yeah.
So those are the kind of like the things that we say that helps breed what we're going to put on there. But also, what's part of the native kind of being in here, right? So lighthouses are real big. So on the Holcomb silos, where it hits at 90, right now there's just a big bird, right?
Yeah.
But on the other side of that 90, you're going to see a bird and a lighthouse.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So, and it's kind of like kept with that kind of theme in mind. So I want the lighthouse to feel like it's facing downtown Toledo, knowing that this is what home is, right? This is your beacon of home.
Yeah.
But then those birds are also flying downriver, right? Which is just a nice, fun way of like kind of showing that you can float away from the city, but you can always know that this is home base.
Wow, that's
right.
Man, looking at that, you're just like, oh, that's cool. There's some
That's
birds.
a silly bird up there.
Yeah, but that's cool. Like,
That's
for
the
people
theme about it.
to understand that, because when you're looking at art, or when I'm looking at art, some stuff is like, oh, that's cool. You can kind of tell what the artist is thinking, and in other cases you don't. And that is. I want to say simplistic, but it's not. But when you explain it like that, you're like, oh yeah, that I clearly see that. That's awesome.
Yeah.
It's, I understand what it is, and it's great. So thank you for sharing that.
No,
that's
thank
awesome.
you.
Yeah.
And I think that when it comes down to, you shouldn't make it too complicated, right? I've seen public art installments where they land in areas of town, and it's like, man, what does that mean?
Yeah.
So you bring up a really strong question, like, how do you come to these conclusions? Like, how do you create public art pieces to help represent communities? but tell a story. And sometimes they're just too far stretched, because you're absolutely right. There's no such thing as a wrong answer with art. Once the creator is done creating it, the viewer and the creator are both the same.
Yeah.
They're only the viewer.
Okay.
And so at that point, you're simply just saying your opinion is as valid as mine. That's what makes art so amazing, in my opinion, is the fact that you can really remove the bias, right? No one's wrong. So if you can take off that answer, say, well, there isn't a wrong answer. Well, okay, great. That means that we're all part of the same tribe, which is what we're trying to get to in the first place, right? Is just to be humans, right? And not belong to some sort of alignment, And I think that's what's so catchy with art is it's a very common language, right? And if it's done just in a positive way, it's non-conflicting. And I think that's what I love about it.
Yeah.
That's what I keep driving for teaching.
I also love the fact now that when our people are in the park, whether it's our staff or just park users, and we're looking at that, I can explain like here's
you go.
So that's cool too. Like having
You get
knowledge,
that,
like I
right?
like having knowledge and to be able to explain that and to talk about the person that did it and and maybe even like, hey, if you want to hear a whole episode, check out the podcast.
Tie it back to this for sure. I love that.
Yeah,
I love it.
But yeah, that's great. What about it was the ADM silos? Is that what you said?
So the ADM silos is that's the changing point in my life. So everyone's got these like mile markers, right? And what happened there was I was working on the railroad, completely miserable. Just knowing that I wasn't doing what I was supposed to be doing in life.
And we'll get back to the silos, but you mentioned the railroad at the beginning, and now what were you doing with the railroad?
So I was a conductor for 16 years.
Okay.
And I worked for the company, and when I hired on, I was in a transition of like the culture out there. So in 2005, when I hired on, there was still a lot of old culture to where you could go to work for like 5 or 6 hours and then go home or do another job. So it was really good being an artist in that world.
Okay.
Yeah. And then once it hit like 2014, 2015, just the culture shifted. It just shifted in a kind of like a dark way.
Okay.
And when it made that move, being an artist, I was really left in a weird place because I didn't want to give that much time to that place.
Okay.
And they kind of started preying on people that had that 15 or 10 to 15 year seniority out there. They knew that you were vested and you're not going to go anywhere.
Oh.
At least they thought. And then when COVID came around, it kind of opened it up that window for me. And I said, okay, well, the ADM Silos was actually promoted to be a Gabe Galt project, from LA. And Gabe, he was the kind of, I would say he's the, the concept guy behind the project, but he didn't do any of the brass for it,
Okay.
like that was the Toledo artist that came up and actually put that, concept to play.
Okay.
But that's what caused me to drive away from the railroad, and I signed up for do it, and I realized I was just really good at it, and then all the artists on that team, to pull off the largest mural in the United States, they just trusted me. They said, yeah, I think this guy's got the vision here.
Okay.
Or at least he's got the balls to say that he does, right? And so I kind of put myself out there and said, well, let's do it, right? I wasn't a kind of like a word guy. I was an action guy. So we started executing, and it was a kind of a weird play because once it became like, okay, he figured it out. Like, it's going to look good, like this is going to be okay.
Yeah.
Then all of a sudden you see all the people trying to put their name on the trophy, and it's like, come on, except all the artists that were actually doing it.
Okay.
And that was the funny part about
Yeah.
it. We're just putting our heads down, having a great time, enjoying days, right? Just painting all day like artists do.
Yeah.
And then you just see the vultures just like chirping away, like, I did it. No, I did it. And it's just like funny. It was funny. But that mural, that changed my whole life. And then since then, that's been now 4 or 5 years, and I just travel the country just doing murals now.
Really?
Yeah. I've had the pleasure of having things in the Fort Lauderdale airport. That was a huge one for me last year. Right down on A1A, there's a beautiful one that talks about service, and also it's incorporating some technology with a QR code that gives people help.
Wow.
So there's like a suicide prevention element to it as well, because that's such a huge battle down there,
Yeah.
especially on the beach. And so, it's just been a great joy, kind of like traveling this way. But that's why I've kind of driven back now. I could have continued that path, and I saw that as like a plateau last year. And I talked to my wife about it, and I said, well, you know what? I think I want to just put all my chips back into Toledo. Like I think that I could continue this path and just keep on, touring and, like going around the country and hitting these things up. But I really like Toledo, and I see this void here in the mural game on the big scale, and I want to give local artists that opportunity as well.
Yeah, because they can see, and maybe someone else, maybe if they get the opportunity, they will continue down that path, and they're happy doing that kind of stuff. But they can also see like, hey, this is something available here right now.
Yes.
And where that might not be, and I can do these things here, whether it's with Dean or alongside him, or he can point me over here, like, hey, check this out, or this is a good guy, or whatever.
Right.
Like to be a part of, especially, excuse me, everything that's happening in Toledo, like we've been talking about, like. It's cool to be a part of it, and
It should be, yeah.
And that's why I like where I'm at Glass City Metro Park. Like, it is a lot of work. And sometimes it sucks, and sometimes
It's not
bad
fun
things
all the
happen,
time,
right? But overall, like our grand plan, our being Toledoans or people who work at the park, or you, or whatever, however you're involved, the grand plan is to make everything better and to make something good for people.
I really hope that becomes like the common like. Through all the politics, right? To get these projects off the ground, it takes an extreme amount of politics. It really does, and it's such a exhausting feature, right? It just weighs on so much energy.
Yeah.
But if you could just get the people in the room just to know, is this about making Toledo better? What we're talking about right now, and I think that if you could get that conversation out there, and get them to just, when they're bickering and going back and forth or not communicating, is this delay helping or hurting Toledo?
Yeah.
And if you could get that like answer right now, like get people to answer that question, yes or no, right now, I think we'd get a lot further done, right? And you're right, there's a lot of grunt work right now. I mean, Toledo's been kind of like sitting in a shell for a hot minute, but I think that we're coming out of that shell in a beautiful, beautiful way. And I'm just blessed to be in that kind of time frame when Toledo's doing that, right? Because 10 years ago, this wasn't that way. Downtown was a ghost town.
Yeah.
I had a studio down there probably when I was tattooing in the late 90s, early 2000s in town, and that was before I got the job on the railroad. And I had a small studio over on Michigan Avenue, and I just remember it just being a complete ghost town.
Really?
Like, it was the wildest thing ever, right? I'm like. All right, like there's no energy around, and you're out there on Friday night, and now you go down there on Friday night and it's booming.
Yeah.
And I love seeing that, right? I love seeing that progression. But Toledo's always kind of in that purgatory of, is it a small city or is it a large city?
Okay.
And does it play small politics? Does it take big politics? And I just wish that we would all just say, is this going to help or hurt Toledo? And I think that's the kind of the answer we're getting to.
What do you get? Because I'm sure you've come across talking about politics. I'm sure you've come across people saying like, well, why should we be spending money on that?
Right.
Why should we be spending money on this mural when we could do other things with it?
That's a great question. And a lot of times, you try to, you've got to have a return on investment, in a lot of those conversations. So, there's, and public art easily is in that conversation. The Metro Parks looks at it and sees it in spades. Like they know the return on their investment with public art is without a doubt there. But when you're talking to a major developer, right, that's just invested $12 million in a project, and you're trying to get them to scrape off like $50,000 on something or $100,000 on something, they're tight on their punt. Their budget's already tight up already. But you have to make the box look different than every other box, right? So, if you're talking, and that's usually the phrase that I tell developers, like, don't be common, you got to look a little different. And if you're going to spend it, this is where you spend it at.
And sometimes it's scary to do that kind of stuff.
Oh, it is.
Right? But also it was probably scary investing $12 million into this.
Exactly,
right?
exactly. But you're customizing it, right?
Yeah,
So, if someone's customizing a car, right, and they just put all this money into the engine, all this money into the thing, what are they going to do with the paint job?
Yeah.
And that's the question, right? Like that's the glimmer. Like that's the jewel of these things. And it's always funny because when the jewel, which is kind of an important feature, right? Like,
Yep.
how are we going to make it known to the world? How are we
Yeah.
going to show this to the world? How are we going to get people to draw to it? That's what you do with the paint job,
Yeah.
right? That's what you do with murals. That's what you do with sculptures. You know, that's how you draw people in. So it's kind of you got to be delicate about it, right? And artists aren't really the most delicate creatures in the world. We're emotional.
Yeah.
You know, we kind of like get our feelings hurt a lot more than we should. But when it's all said and done, I think that's what you got to kind of relay to them and say, listen, this is the important part, you know. So we'll keep it affordable, right? You know, it doesn't have to. And I think that's another feature too. I've watched a lot of these big projects waste tremendous amount of money when it comes to the public art aspect. You know, I watched the project. Man, they must have wasted 30 to 40% of the budget.
Really?
Yeah.
And how does that, like, what does waste look like?
Waste
with
is
a mural
waste
or a
is.
project like that?
I think it's paying people that aren't doing anything.
Okay.
Right? That come there saying they got a magic trick and that they're worth it, and they can't produce, and someone else has to fill their shoes. I think that's really wasteful.
Yeah.
I think they also take advantage, right? Like they have people like, you know, there was a project in town where, you know, people just weren't educated. They just want to be part of it, but they actually held the project together.
Okay.
And then there was another entity that just completely said they were going to handle all that, and they got paid tremendous amount of money, and they didn't do anything. You know, so it's kind of like that unnecessary world right there. But you live and learn, you know. And I think that's the one thing with the River Gallery project is I've kept it as lean as I possibly could, and I want to keep it really transparent to the city, right? So, you know, when you see a price on a mural, it's actually less than what it's going to cost if you were just to paint it regular.
Okay.
So people can say, well, shoot, that's reasonable, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we're going to paint it anyways, right? If it was going to get painted, so he's going to be able to create a mural there for a price that's less than what it was going to be to paint the thing. Okay.
Yeah.
So we can take that fight off the table, right? And sooner or later, you just get off the fights, and then you're just left with yes.
Yeah.
Let's just do it. You know?
Well, I'm sure you've been doing this long enough where you know, like, the questions that are going to be asked. You know, like, well, they're probably going to talk about this, and they're going to ask this, and it's the same. My answer is going to be the same time when I talk to Jim about that one thing. You know, so like I'm assuming you
get rid of all the no's.
Yeah.
You really do, and I think that's a big thing with me is just being able to eliminate all those kind of hard conversations.
Yeah.
But make them feel comfortable, right? And one of the things that I always leave any conversation with is there anything else? Is there anything you need from me?
Yep.
You know, and I think by leaving them, you know, question free, right? I think that gives a lot of confidence that I'm not here just to scam somebody.
Yeah.
You know, that we are here for a good purpose. And I think the good purpose is the beautification process.
Yeah.
You know, and that's what we're in right now. You know, I think that's where we're at. I mean, and that's what's keeping us human. You know, the world needs to kind of relate to that a little bit.
Yeah.
So.
You mentioned hard conversations, and I'm sure obviously negotiating and all that kind of stuff is difficult conversations. But I'm sure also people ask you about other artists, like, "Hey, we've also been talking to this person or that person." Yeah. Where do you go? Like, how do you navigate that kind of stuff? Because I know for me, it's hard to, unless there's someone that did something personally to me. I'm like,
right.
That guy's a shitbag. I don't want to deal with him.
That's right.
You know? But like, how do you navigate that kind of stuff?
Well, I give a lot of artists in the Toledo community first dibs on things. And I've worked with like a lot. I gave a lot of artists last year opportunities in the Toledo area. And there's been a lot of artists that they're kind of proven me that they weren't up to the par.
Okay.
And I've given it other chances, right? But you don't keep on getting burned, you know?
Yeah.
And I think that's a lesson that everyone learns, right? You're going to get burned if you're going to be kind. And that's okay. You know, listen, it's not a battle. It's not a bad thing to get burned every once in a while, right? And you can still be kind after you get burned through it. But I think that the big process is, you know, everyone has bad moments in creations, right? And I haven't hit home runs on all my paintings that I've done. You leave something, maybe your mind was somewhere else, right? You weren't at the right pace. You were trying to rush it. You're trying to, you were being procrastinating it, like all that kind of things matters. And that's okay, right? When it comes down to the project itself. But when it comes, every artist, one of the reason why I hire all these artists is because I know that I'm not capable or can pull it off the best.
Okay.
So what I do is, when I see a project, especially the ones in Toledo that are kind of like for the whole kind of scheme of things, downtown and the river, if there's an element of the design that I know they're going to pull it off better, that's like saying, why am I going to use a spoon instead of a knife, to cut this up?
Yeah.
Right? I mean, it's stupid. So I'm going to hire somebody like a Chris Rodriguez or a Contron, or maybe I'm going to give this upcoming artist, Chris, I can't remember his last name. Excuse me. I'm going to give him a swing at this, right? Or Taylor, she's a battle axe when it comes to murals, right? Her detail work is amazing, right? And so I'm going to give them a swing at it, right? They can eat too, and they're just going to make the mural better for me, or for the community. Yeah. So let's embrace that, right? But like teaching art, that's another aspect that I do in the wintertime when the murals aren't, happening. And I taught a class last year, and we had an 8th grader in there. And then we also had other kind of like women in there that were up to seniors in high school. And I told everyone, I said, listen, this 8th grader's got a better hand than I've ever had, hands down. Like she was just taking that brush and bending it, right? And I'm like, oh my God, this kid's got so much talent. So you've got to give these opportunities out there, and also there's no cliques. Like that's the one thing that I'm trying to remove in the Toledo area is the little tribes that we kind of belong in, right? If you're just a good artist, you're a good artist, and just let it be that. Yeah. And so if this person can do it, and they're, it doesn't matter who they're, hanging around with. If they want to be part of the project, I'm going to give them a call, and see if they can be part of it. Yeah. So, yeah.
Well, that's good to give back, to teach people, or to, in some cases, this person's is capable of it, but they never getting given the opportunity, all that stuff. And I think the most important thing you mentioned too is like, you're going to get burned. That's what happens. I'd much rather be getting burned, being really kind and giving someone the opportunity. And
Absolutely.
But after the fact, you're like, but we can still be kind after that, because maybe there is learning opportunities for that person and for you. Like, here's what we can do to make this better. And, I want to give you another shot, in the future. So let's work on this stuff.
If that person can come there and talk about it and say, what, maybe I wasn't doing my best, I'm so sorry, and just be positive about it. Yeah. It can be a great learning experience, which makes a stronger friendship. Yeah. But if someone's trying to defer blame or kind of push it off, maybe that's just, they're not in the right season for you on this project, and so you just kind of just take a step back and just, hopefully you find them again when it's time. Yeah.
Do you have a favorite project, piece, anything in your whole life, like something that you're like, man, that's my favorite thing I've ever done?
Man, that's a good one. I think that the underpass over it there, that was a strong piece. I really love that one over on Main Street. That was always the first conversation that came up there that, was, and I use that mural a lot for conversations, is because the people are like, well, what happens when it gets tagged? Business owners, right? Why are we gonna invest this money when it's out to the public and someone's just gonna piss on it? Yeah. Or deface it. And I always use that project because that's in a war zone.
100%
over on the east side. There's people they're traveling, walking right next to it. It's in a blast radius that's easily vandalized. But one of the ways that I combat that is while I'm painting those murals, I always try to talk to the people that are walking by me. I'm not better than them. Hell, I used to run with them. I mean that was part of my DNA. I grew up on the east side too, so I understand like just walking around. Yeah. But I'm not going to snub them, right? Because they're going to come back and be like, "No, screw this cat." Yeah. So what I do is I talk to them, and then I get their initials, right, or their name, or some little message they might want me to put, and I throw it in the mural. So now they're infused into the mural. Now they combat that vandalism. by doing it with positivity.
They have ownership of it too.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And it matters. Now, nobody knows how many names I sneak in murals. There's not a clue.
Speaking of sneaking in names, I just met someone who worked for Earl Mechanical.
Okay.
He said that he went to high school with you, and I can't remember. I can't remember his name, but he said you were doing a mural on a marina or somewhere or on a restaurant. He goes, "Oh, can you put my boat in that in a mural?" And he says you put his boat in there.
That's right.
And I can't remember his name now, though. I forget. But
That's
yeah.
I think that was the one that we're out at High Flash, and I think I snuck his name in that vote. But why not? I mean,
that's awesome.
It's giving. Like, I don't own this time, right? So if somebody has the ability to come through and kind of like help personalize it, right? I believe in that 100%. But when back to like these business owners, they'll ask me, they'll be like, well, how do we stop the vandalism? What's the guarantees on this, right? And I'll always say, 7 years, I want to keep eyes on it for 7 years no matter what. If it's breaking down, if I'm having a paint failure, if whatnot's happening, I want to fix it for you. I want to make it look good still. But I also want to be able to give a fresh set of eyes on it within 7 years. Maybe I missed something.
Yeah.
Maybe I didn't tighten it up, and I can see something later with a clean view and make it look better. And I don't want to have to go back and ask permission to do it. I've already created that path for me.
Yeah.
So I can just say, well, I don't even have to say anything. I can just go and say, I'm going to paint this. I seen something I missed. Boom, I'm gonna dial that in.
Yeah.
And for 7 years, that's an amazing window to be able to hold the kind of like contract for, right? Because you can then, be in a different era of your stage, right? Maybe Toledo's in a different kind of like way. Maybe it's uplifted more. Mm-hmm. You can add something to it.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So you can look at it in a positive way instead of just saying, I want my money now, and this is all you're getting. You get a pretty strong bandwidth then. Mm-hmm. But it's also the combating the vandalism conversation. I mean, you're obviously going to put an anti-graffiti. You can't control all the people, so you want to put a little bit of safety net on it.
Yeah.
But we didn't have any problems, honestly. And everyone's like, you better knock on wood. And I'm like, well.
Well, you know what I learned, too?
I think I'm pretty good right now.
Yeah, but dealing with International Park, Glass City Upriver, we went through there, and there was a bunch of stuff that we had to spray paint over. All those electrical boxes I spray painted gray. The underpasses over by the Anthony Wayne Bridge.
Yeah.
We painted those. And what I'm learning, whether it's just respect or laziness on their part or whatever, like once we cover something up mostly once, but sometimes like 2 times, you got to come back and do it again. They're not doing it anymore.
That's right.
They're like, hey, I tried. I don't want to do it anymore. Or you know what? They got me. I'm just not going to worry about it.
We're not going to keep battling this and go back and forth.
Yeah.
I always think it's funny too, because one of the things that kills me is like, especially ODOT, and ODOT's been really amazing this year. And people are like, you got permission from ODOT? Yeah, we got permission from ODOT. They're okay. They like it because they've got, an anti-graffiti squad, right?
Okay.
Somebody is hired to do this. Well, they're probably on the other side of 70, and their eyes don't work that well. And you can tell because the paint isn't even close to the color of the substrate. So it's like, did that guy just use like a beige, right, over a gray? Like, I think he's missing some numbers on his color codes, man. But they're good people, but they see it, and doing it with a positive, if you're going to touch something up, right, put a little mural there. That's how I think about it. So people get to see it. It's positive. It's far likely less to get, tagged again, like you said.
Yeah.
And that was the experiment on the Anthony Wayne Trail Bridge, the bridge that goes down on the Anthony Wayne Trail by Maumee.
Okay.
When we did that overpass, that was because there was some kids vandalizing that.
Yeah.
And so we cleaned it up. We got a beautiful mural there now, right? And we're really seeing to see if someone wants to come through and put a little kind of graffiti action on it. I encourage kids that if you are thinking about being part of that, just reach out to me. I'll get you a wall if you want.
Yeah.
If you want to do something and make it look good. If you're just being a heathen, well,
putting initials on something or whatever.
If you want to be that guy, listen, I'm going to catch you. I'm going to cover your shit up and you're going to laugh about it. Right. But trust me, I've got more paint than you do. And so I promise you that I'll always get you on that. But at the end of the day, I hope these kids that are pursuing art, and they want to put some murals out there,
Yeah.
reach out to me. I'll be happy to put you to work.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome, man. And well, with that, 'cause that was a great note. I do appreciate you coming out here, man. It's
I'm glad we could talk, man.
Yeah, it's great to be able to see your work from
Thank
my
you.
office. That's awesome. It's beautiful work. I'll put your Facebook page
Thank you.
or Instagram or whatever you have. I'll put it in the show notes so people can check all your stuff out. And for whatever, like I do, you're a great communicator. This goes back to that mural we just talked about under the pedestrian bridge.
Thank you.
Having to, hey, can we use this space, or can you get us in here, or we'll make sure we clean this up, or we'll make sure we're locked in. Like you're always, I like helping you because you're helping. Your art's helping a lot of people.
Thank you so much.
Beautifying
its
the
purpose
space.
is there. Right
Yeah.
there.
Yes.
So
It's
beautiful.
awesome. So thanks again, man. This
Thanks
is
for
awesome.
everything. No, I appreciate it.
Thanks for downloading this episode of the Nerdball Podcast. If you want to reach out or be on the show, just search the Nerdball Podcast on any social media. If you want to email us, that is thenerdballpodcast@gmail.com. And of course, there's always YouTube, so you can go on there, subscribe to the Nerdball Podcast, and watch the podcast every week. As always, thanks to Real JP Multimedia, Cuddlefish Graphics, Big Daddy Graphics, and Perrysburg Junior High STEM Lab for always supporting the podcast. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.